I want you to picture the version of you that exists only in other people's heads, the one who dresses a certain way so no one laughs, who orders the normal thing at the restaurant, who rehearses a text message 4 times before sending it, who would rather stay quiet in a room full of strangers than risk saying something stupid. That version of you isn't keeping you safe. It's running your life. And 2,000 years ago, a Roman philosopher who advised an emperor, and was eventually ordered by that same emperor to end his own life, figured out exactly how to kill it. His name was Seneca, and his advice was brutal. So I decided to actually do what he suggested, not read about it. Do it. For 24 hours in public on purpose. Here's what happened, and here's the philosophy that made it possible. Most of us think we're afraid of embarrassment. We're not. We're afraid of the idea of embarrassment, a scenario we invent, replay, and flinch away from before it's ever happened. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Not as comfort, as a diagnosis. The thing torturing you isn't the stranger's judgment. It's the movie you're directing in your head where that judgment destroys you. And here's the part that stings. You've built an entire personality around avoiding that movie. The career path you didn't take because it looked strange to your family. The hobby you quit because someone smirked. The opinion you swallowed in a meeting because disagreeing felt like exposure. Every one of those moments, your ego, your attachment to how you're perceived, made the decision instead of you. Seneca called this being a slave to the crowd's opinion, not a metaphor, a literal loss of freedom, because the moment your actions are dictated by what spectators might think, you no longer belong to yourself. You belong to an audience that statistically forgot about you 5 minutes later. The question isn't whether you have an ego, everyone does. The question is whether you're its owner or its hostage. Seneca didn't just philosophize about this from a comfortable villa. He built an actual training method, and it's stranger than most self-help advice you've heard. In one of his letters, he tells Lucilius to set aside a number of days on which he'll pretend to be poor, cheap food, coarse, ugly clothing, sleeping on a hard bed. Not because he was actually poor, Seneca was in fact wildly wealthy, but so he could ask himself a question while doing it. Is this really the condition that I feared? That's the whole method. You don't defeat a fear by avoiding it or by gritting your teeth through it once. You defeat it by deliberately walking toward a smaller, controlled version of it over and over until your nervous system learns the truth your mind already suspected, that the catastrophe was never as large as the anticipation. He extended the same logic to reputation. Seneca argued that as long as you're pleasing the crowd, you're an accomplice to your own decline, because the crowd rewards conformity, not truth. The cure wasn't isolation. It was exposure. Deliberately doing the thing that might look foolish so that looking foolish stops having power over you. This is the part almost nobody actually practices. We'll meditate. We'll journal. We'll listen to a philosophy podcast on the treadmill. But we won't stand in a public square and let people see us do something undignified. And that's precisely the exercise Seneca is prescribing, not comfort, exposure. So that's what I built. 24 hours, 5 deliberately humiliating, harmless public tasks. 1 rule, no explaining myself to anyone. Task 1, sit on the sidewalk, not a bench. The ground, in the middle of a busy street, in work clothes, for 10 minutes, doing nothing. No phone. Just sitting while people walked around me, glanced, some clearly wondering if I was all right. The urge to explain myself, to hold up an invisible sign that says, "This is intentional, I'm fine," was almost unbearable. That urge is the ego talking. It would rather you suffer than be misjudged for a moment. Task 2, sing out loud, walking down a crowded street badly, on purpose. Seneca's point about imagined suffering hit hardest here. I had built up, in my head, a scene where everyone stops and stares. What actually happened? Almost nobody looked up from their phones. The audience I was so afraid of had never been paying attention in the first place. Task 3, ask a stranger for something small and slightly odd. Directions to a store I could see with my own eyes or the time while wearing a watch. The goal wasn't the information. It was tolerating the 2 seconds of "why is he asking me this" on their face and staying in it instead of over-explaining. Task 4, wear something absurd into a normal setting. A single glaringly mismatched item. Nothing offensive, just wrong. Into a grocery store, a coffee shop, a meeting. This one connects directly to Seneca's poverty exercise. He dressed down to test his fear of poorness. I dressed wrong to test my fear of judgment. Same muscle. Task 5. Fail at something physical in public without recovering gracefully. I chose a skill I'm genuinely bad at in a space where people could see, and just let the failure sit there, uncorrected, unexplained. No self-deprecating joke to smooth it over. Just the failure, witnessed. By task 3, something had already shifted. Not confidence, exactly. Something quieter. A kind of slack in a rope that had been pulled tight for years. Here's what surprised me. I expected the hard part to be the tasks themselves. It wasn't. The hard part was the 10 seconds before each one. The imagined audience, the imagined verdict, the imagined damage to some reputation I was apparently guarding like a museum piece. And once I moved through that 10 seconds 5 separate times, something Seneca said stopped being a quote and started being true. The opinion of the crowd was never actually load-bearing. It felt load-bearing because I'd never tested the beam. This isn't about becoming shameless or performing for attention. That's just ego wearing a different costume. It's about finding out with your own body, in your own city, that the version of you terrified of one stranger's glance was negotiating with a ghost. Seneca wasn't telling Lucilius to enjoy poverty or humiliation. He was telling him to prove through direct experience that the fear was bigger than the thing. Your ego isn't destroyed by an idea. It's destroyed by evidence. You don't need 24 hours or 5 public tasks to start. You need one small, safe, faintly embarrassing thing you've been avoiding, and the willingness to do it without narrating yourself out of the discomfort. Seneca spent a lifetime rehearsing loss, so that loss would never own him. You can spend one day rehearsing embarrassment so that embarrassment never owns you again. The self you're protecting was never as fragile as you thought. Go find out. Remember, think more deeply, live more intentionally. Repeat the process for a lifetime of growth. Because personal transformation doesn't happen through a single insight, it happens through continuous reflection, conscious action, and the courage to keep learning what it means to be human. If you're seeking wisdom, inner growth, emotional resilience, and practical tools for living a more examined and meaningful life, you're in the right place. Think deeply. Live wisely, repeat endlessly.